I'd like to call this April 16th meeting of the Cookeville City Council to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Oh.
Councilman Anderson.
Present.
Councilman Shelton.
Here.
Mayor Salee.
Present.
Vice Mayor Davis.
Present.
Councilman Williams.
Present.
All present.
All present. Could we all rise for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Shipley, do we have any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Need to add 2 items. Item 10, consider resolution R90405, updating the interlocal agreement with the Tennessee Municipal League Risk Management Pool. And I'll be the sponsor of that one. Item 11, consider approval of contract with Cookeville Boat Dock Utility District. Sponsor will be our city attorney, Mr. Rader.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended?
So move.
Second.
Have our motion and our second. Any discussion, comment? Seeing none, all vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Brings us to our old business portion of the meeting. We have 3 items. Item 2, consider approval of minutes of council meeting held April the 2nd, 2009. Do we have a motion and a second to approve?
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing no discussion, all vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Item 3, consider on second and final reading ordinance 090302, amendments to the zoning code 204.9, fences, walls, and hedges. Sponsor, Mr. James Mills.
Mayor and council members, the components of the proposed revisions include requiring permits for new fences and walls, limiting fence and wall materials, regulating the height, location, and orientation of fences and walls, and requiring maintenance of fences and walls. The proposed amendments have been approved by the Planning Commission, are recommended by the Planning Department. We have received a few calls since first reading. Most of the calls were inquiries as to when the regulations would become effective.
Do we have a motion and a second to approve on second reading?
Move approval. Moved.
We have our motion and our second. Any discussion by the council? Go ahead.
Okay. I have gotten some comments regarding the fences over the period of time since the last time we voted, and most of the comments have been positive for what the Planning Commission wants to do. And as a matter of fact, I personally have not gotten a negative comment from anyone. And one of the things that I did just for my own personal benefit, I did seek out different styles of fences. Now, I'm never going to put up a fence where I live, or what I have is a little fence for my dog in the backyard, which nobody sees but the dog and us. But, you know, I'm not the least bit interested in fencing my property, but I did notice that there are all sorts of fences out there, and most of them would comply with this regulation, and that the price variances for the fences that were the same on the back and the front, there wasn't that great a difference.
Well, as verbalized last time, I think the ordinance by and large is good, but there is a couple things I had issue with, and I had made an amendment last time. It did not pass. I would like to offer another amendment which coincides with many of the calls that I received, that people do feel that what I was saying about the facing of the fence. While I proposed last time to do away with it completely, I would propose that we leave the part where it faces the road, that the good side would face out, but any fence between property owners would be left to the choice of the person putting the fence up, how they face that. And one, that would be my, let me comment on it before I say that as a motion. One thing being, and this was brought up to me too, that, you know, if you face the good side out and it's on between two property owners, if something happens and the wind blows it down, you've got to access, you've got to get on somebody else's property to fix it. And as I commented before, if you've got good neighbors, hopefully you're going to work together and put the fence up to both of your satisfactions anyway. If you don't, then you're probably fencing off for a reason. And so I just feel it would create a conflict having to go on somebody else's property to fix a fence panel. Also, the comment was made about the exposed nails. I'm sure exposed nails could be fixed, but if the fence were on your property and not directly on the line, then anyone that came in contact with it on the opposite side would be on your property anyway. And then the opposite of that would be, obviously, if I was forced to do this and left the bad side facing my property, my child running into it would be no less important than a neighbor's child. So obviously, you can see different sides to this issue, but I would make it in the form of a motion to exclude fences between property owners from this amendment.
We have a motion to amend on the floor to put the good face out on the fence to the front of the property and the bad side.
Any street.
Any street. Kathy, can you read us the amendment?
Councilman Shelton makes a motion to amend the motion to exclude the restriction of having the bad side between the property owners facing outside of the property owners.
Exclude from the between property owners the finished side having to be faced outward.
Outward.
It would be the choice of the fence constructor.
All right. We have the amendment. Motion to amend. Do we have a second? Seeing no second to the motion to amend, the amendment fails due to lack of second. Now back to the original motion to consider the second and final reading of the ordinance of the fences, walls, and hedges. Do we have any further discussion by the council?
Mr. Mayor, I had one phone call from a citizen that said, has anybody thought about the fact that if you put the fence 6 inches from your property line, then you have to get on your neighbor's property to erect the fence. I mean, that could be a problem at some point too, I would think.
I think, in that situation, you would have to, one of the determining factors as to whether or not you got to put your fence on your property line would be whether or not your neighbor would grant you permission to get on their property.
I told him I'd pass that along, so I passed that along.
I know I had a fencing issue on my family's farm here in Cookeville where we bordered a neighborhood, and I think the residents there thought the fence was the line, and actually upon having it surveyed, it was not. The fence was actually over on our property about 18 to 24 inches.
Yeah.
Which had allowed for, and it was a woven wire farm fence, but and that may be the case in this situation too, that people have to, even though the ordinance says you can go to the line, I understand, that you might have to come in 18 or 24 inches to allow the construction.
Well, of course, that's not specified now under our current regulations, and I don't know how many times it's been a problem under our current provisions, and that's why I guess why it's not addressed in the proposed requirements. It's not been an issue that we know of. Put them on property lines now.
Well, and I think it does talk about the property line dispute, that it's the sole responsibility of the person erected the fence to find out where the property line is.
204.9C, location number 1, it says it can be placed up to side and rear property lines. Owner of the property of where it is placed is responsible for locating the property line, and I would encourage folks to do just that, because you could run into some other issues there too.
Well, we would encourage them to communicate with their neighbors too, to let them know they're joining
they
property
can.
owners. Yes.
Well, I want to commend the Planning Commission for this hard work, because it's certainly not going to please everybody, but I think in general most people will appreciate having the aesthetic appearance. That would be quite pleasing, I think, to most people, some of these ideas that you've come up with, and hopefully they'll work. And certainly appreciate Councilman Shelton's problem, but I think for the most part, this should work.
One point of clarification, on a current fence, all current fences are grandfathered, correct?
In terms of getting a permit, you can, yes, they are. Excuse me, yes, all current fencing is grandfathered in.
So if you have a fence and a car runs through it, or act of God and the wind blows it down, can you build it back like it was?
Yes.
Okay.
Except if you replace, the only provision in there, if the fence faces outward, or the opposite, with the unfinished side facing outward, and you replace that fence, then you must place the finished side facing outward.
What if it's just one panel?
Yeah.
We'd let you, that's not, we consider that maintenance, not replacement.
Okay.
So if you could maintain enough speed to take out the whole property line, then you would have to replace the entire property line. Correct.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I too want to commend the Planning Commission. Obviously, this is something that we have worked on for months, I think, James, and so it's not to be, of course, I know the council knows and the public sometimes doesn't see, but we spend a lot of hours on this kind of thing, looking at other communities and what works well for them. And of course, I talked to a citizen today that was in favor of what we were doing, and he said, you know, planning, and he tells us what we tell ourselves on the Planning Commission. Planning is about what we want the city of Cookeville to look like 5, 10, or 20 years from now. And of course, this is not going to make a dramatic impact today, but long after we're off the council, I feel like that this is going to make our community a better place to live and to look, and a better community to live in. So appreciate the Planning Commission and the council.
Any further comments by the council? Any comments from the audience? Seeing no further comments, I'll vote.
4 yes, 1 no, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Item 4, consider on second and final reading ordinance 090303, rezoning 6.7 acres on the Gainsborough grade at tax map 39, parcel 58.04 from CL local commercial and excuse me, an RS10 single-family residential to a RS5 single-family residential. Sponsor, Mr. James Mills.
Mayor and council members, the subject property is depicted on the screen. The rezoning was initiated by the property owner. The proposed rezoning has been approved by the Planning Commission. It's recommended by the Planning Department, and the Planning Department has received no comments since first reading.
Okay, do we have a motion and a second?
Move approval.
Second.
We have our motion and our second. Any discussion by the council? Any comments from the audience? Seeing no further comments, I'll vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
Thank you.
New business. Item 5, consider resolution 090404, authorizing the execution terms, issuance, sale, and payment of not to exceed $2.7 million for the Gas Department Revenue Refunding Bond Series 2009, and providing the details thereof. Sponsor, Mr. Mike Davidson.
Mayor and council members, back in 2001, the gas system issued $3.1 million in revenue bonds. We still owe, including interest, $2,808,000 on those bonds. And back in the end of December, those bonds became redeemable without penalty, and we started looking at interest rates. And what I have for you to consider is a resolution that will allow me to issue new bonds, pay off the existing debt. The new bonds would carry principal and interest to maturity through 2016 of $2,620,000. After issue cost, underwriters discounts, everything, we can save over the next 7 years right at $14,800 per year, and in present value terms, that's close to $86,000 or $87,000 we could save in interest cost, net of all expenses, and I would recommend your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Do we have a motion and a second to approve?
So move.
We have our motion and our second. Any discussion by the council?
Always good to save money.
Yeah, Mike, we appreciate you watching and doing a good job managing that. Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Davidson. Item 6, hold a public hearing for grant application to the U.S. Department of Justice for JAG funds, the Justice Assistance Grants. Sponsor, Ms. Kathy Andrews.
Mayor and City Council will be applying for grant funds through the U.S. Department of Justice for the JAG grant. This grant is due May the 18th. No match requirement. The amount of the grant would be approximately $47,000. The program requires that we inform the public of our intention to apply for the funds and our intended use of the funds. Our intended uses will be to purchase 1 patrol car and approximately 4 video cameras for the cars. I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, do we have any questions from the council? Questions from the audience? All right. I don't believe we don't need a vote on that, do we, Mr. Shibley? It's just a public hearing?
No, it's just for me to
All right. Well,
inform you.
we certainly appreciate
All right.
all your hard work on grants, and we hope for a successful outcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7, consider appointments to the Cookeville Tree Board, sponsor Mayor Salee. We have 2 positions that that are open currently with the Cookeville Tree Board, and we have been given the names of Rosemary Ponte and Ann Lawald. And I know the Soil Conservation Office, not this year's awards, but last year's award, Ms. Ponte and her property was
Yes,
awarded, and
yeah.
the pictures
Very
were
pretty.
spectacular. And we're very pleased to have people that are willing to participate with our Cookeville Tree Board. So I would ask the council to accept these 2 as the appointments to the tree board. And I don't know, do we need to make a motion on that, Mr. Shipley?
Is that a mayor appointment or a council appointment? It's council, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do a motion on it. I think it's
Yes,
a council
do.
one.
Well, I'll make that as a form of a motion.
Second.
All right, now we have our second. Any discussion by the council?
It's always good to have people who want to serve and volunteer and are willing to do it, so.
Are these, I noticed that on the tree board that these expirations are really close together. Are these individuals finishing a term? Do we know?
They all expire in August.
Okay.
So
This may be, we were unsure, Kathy and I talked just before the meeting, we were unsure which of the positions these 2 were fulfilling, so we'll probably want to, Kathy, you may want to request that information from the tree board, and we may end up having to revisit this issue in August and hopefully
Right.
just reappoint these same people, but they are finishing up. We had, 1 position has been vacant due to a board member resigning. Other position was vacated as the member opted out of a second 3-year term, so we'll find out those dates, but I think now this will definitely get us through August. This August. Any further comments? Any comments from the audience? Any members of the tree board that, I don't think we have anybody with us tonight? Seeing no further comments, I'll vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
All right, thank you. Item 8, consider approval of proposal for design services for the Dogwood Park expansion project. Sponsor, Mr. Rick Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, we requested proposals for design services and construction documents for the expansion of Dogwood Park. And in this phase, we are looking for a final grading plan and drainage plan, the location of park amenities such as the interactive water feature, the restroom facility, benches and trash receptacles, the lighting, and all of the signage. We're asking them to handle the coordination of utilities, the layout of utilities, the paving patterns and details and material specifications, the walkways and parking lot layout. We're asking the firm to develop a complete landscaping plan, including tree planting layout, specification and details, and the planting bed areas, the locations of those, and the specifications and details. We're asking for a complete irrigation plan, the design and construction plans for a restroom facility, and we're asking them to develop an RFP for the interactive water feature design and installation, and to solicit proposals and make recommendations to the city for the selection of a manufacturer and installation contractor. We also are asking them to conduct at least one public meeting for review of these plans, the final plans, and to accept and seek input from the Department of Leisure Services and City Council and citizens. That's what the scope of the work is. We received 5 proposals. All were good proposals. All have an understanding of the scope of work that is required. All 5 companies or design teams provided us with design fees for the work described, and we are recommending Michael Brady Incorporated as the lowest proposed fee. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, do we have a motion and a second?
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion to move for approval. Do we have any discussion by the council?
Some of these things, Rick, like the conduit for lighting and some of the waste receptacles, some of these things we're going to do with our own forces, correct?
We will do a lot of the construction. The only thing that we look at contracting out will be the irrigation and the water feature. That's what we will contract out in terms of putting in and building and installing, so to speak. Everything else we can do, we believe we can do in-house.
I would just point out that the bid of the what was it, 24.5, that was the only one that that met the actually in our budget for this, and that was I think that's very important, that because we don't have much money to do all these things, and so I feel that it's important that we be very conservative with our money.
Rick,
Go
did you-
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment. I think I sent city manager, and I may have copied you on some waste receptacles that I saw that were solar-powered compactors, that kind of thing.
I heard about it, but I haven't seen them.
Okay, well, I found those the other day, and they're extremely expensive compared to what you probably could get one for this budget. But I thought it would be interesting to consider anyways, as far as future, maybe we could...
Well, and those are things that we'll be asking this design firm to look at with us and make recommendations for based on the amount of budget that we have and amount of money that we have available.
Right.
Well, within the scope, though, you did say it did include the interactive water feature, bringing back proposals, designs.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Very good.
And you think that the interactive water feature is about the only thing that we would have to hire out, that we're going to try to do everything?
We can do most everything in-house. We will probably want a contractor to come in and do the irrigation if we're
Right.
doing 100% irrigation on the
Okay.
property. The water feature, we definitely want to contract out. Depending on what the restroom facility is and we can do a lot of that construction. We may have to contract out some aspects of that masonry work, that sort of thing. We may have to, if there is any, we may have to look at some of that. But most of that we can do in-house. The sidewalks, we have wonderful in-house people that can help and provide a lot of those services, and the utilities are great to work with us and can help us out with providing a lot of those services as well.
And as you can tell by this room, we got some pretty good craftsmen too, since they remodeled this room.
Only question I have, Rick, and I can certainly respect us trying to stay under budget with the 24.5 bid, but was there any consideration given to using one of the 2 local bidders?
Absolutely. I mean, we considered that and talked about that, and I've met with at least one of those companies, local companies, and talked about it quite a bit. So yes, that is a consideration. The proposed fees we determined was significantly less and within our budget, and that's why we made the recommendation we made.
It's important to note, too, that I think all the firms, all 5 will have local principals here as far as project managers. They state project managers or engineering folks, correct? That will be utilizing,
Michael Brady has indicated that they plan to use Clinton Engineering for any civil engineering work that they have, and that is a local company.
okay.
Any comments from the audience? I would just like to thank Rick and his staff for getting all this put together, and all the bidders, I think, did a good job of making proposals, and we certainly appreciate their willingness to work in our community. And I think, I know for myself and probably Councilman Shelton and Vice Mayor Davis, we will be glad to, having begun this project in the last council, we'll be very glad to see it through to its entirety, hopefully soon, if the rain will stop.
Right.
Yeah, it needs to dry up a little bit.
So hopefully we'll get something going soon. Any further discussion by the council? Any further comments? Seeing none, all vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Woods.
Thank you.
Item 9, consider awarding bid for 50 KVA transformers. Sponsor, Mr. Tony Peete.
Mayor and council, we've solicited an open bids on transformers, and I'd request your approval of Wesco being the low evaluated bidder meeting specs.
Do we have a motion and a second to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion by the council? Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll vote.
Thank you.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Brings us to item 10, consider resolution 090405, updating the interlocal agreement with the Tennessee Municipal League Risk Management Pool. Sponsor, Mr. Jim Shipley.
Mayor and council, according to this memorandum we got from from TML, it says their board of directors voted unanimously a number of years ago not to assess members should funds become insufficient to meet the obligations of the pool. And at that time, the assessment clause was formally removed from all the insurance policies. They also have added had an addendum as required by the Tennessee Reform Act of 2006 for ethics reform. And this resolution will bring our interlocal agreement with TML, and it will now be consistent with the interlocal agreement with TML. And I would recommend your approval.
All right, do we have a motion and a second to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
We have our motion and our second. Any discussion by the council? Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. Item 11, consider approval of contract with Cookeville Boat Dock Utility District. Sponsor, Mr. Dan Rader.
Yes, at the last council meeting, I'm sure everyone will remember, this proposed agreement was on the agenda, and we discussed it at that time. But based upon a review of the agreement, we felt that we needed to make some slight revisions to clarify some timetables and some other issues in the agreement. Since that time, we have made those revisions, and we have submitted it to the city. Submitted it to the Cookeville Boat Dock Utility District. It is my understanding that at least it has received a generally favorable response, although they have not formally approved it yet. This agreement essentially provides, among other things, that the city of Cookeville will be allowed to serve through their utilities the services at the new business park that's being developed that was approved earlier this year. And it also is a benefit to the utility district because it gives them some additional time on their agreement for water services from the city, and some additional allowances in the amount of water they can ultimately use should that become necessary. So basically this would be a win-win situation for both the city of Cookeville and the Boat Dock Utility District, and hopefully after if the city will approve it tonight, the Boat Dock Utility District will follow suit right away, and this matter can be, we can move forward with the business park and with this servicing these customers in this agreement.
Very good. Do we have a motion and a second to approve?
So move.
Second.
We have our motion and our, excuse me, motion and our second. Do we have any discussion by the council? And just make just a quick comment that I really appreciate, Dan, your work on this, and also the members of the utility district for working with us on this, and hopefully we'll come to a resolution on it really quick here. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll vote.
5 yes votes, motion carries.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rader. At this time, we open up our meetings here at City Hall to the citizens of Cookeville and I guess pretty much anywhere. We've had folks from all over the world come and address our council before. But we'll give you up to 3 minutes to come and speak. You can give your opinions and ideas to us, and there were a few seats left tonight. We meet first and third Thursdays, and we'd like to have you come out, share your opinions with us. And at this time, I'll also open up the floor to the rest of the council. Any announcements?
I wanted to mention the Redbud Festival and all the things that continue to go on with that, and people need to be, I noticed that the last couple of weekends here in Cookeville and the surrounding area have just been chock full of all sorts of interesting things to do, and we hope that people will get out and enjoy this great community we live in.
Very good. Well, seeing no further comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.